Lovely. So welcome to our third annual Winter Institute, a call inward space for grace and space rather for collective renewal. We're incredibly excited about what we have offered today in this half day, really meant to feel like a retreat, meant to feel warm and soft and safe. And we are deeply grateful for you showing up, for your time and your energy. It's a precious gift, this time that you are offering us against all that is required of you in your day as educators and holding space for others. So thank you deeply. We at the School Crisis Recovery and Renewal Project believe that healing is a collective effort just as much as it is individual. So we really value this time, this kind of chunky time to settle in to community together. Your attendance this morning is really powerful, and it's in direct resistance to socialization that undercuts our efforts towards healing and wellness. So want to recognize that as we start off. Our hope today is that this time together will feel gentle and vibrant, that this call inward is a gracious and spacious time for introspection, for creative inquiry, and for wisdom to surface, the wisdom we hold and the wisdom of our faculty. So can go on to the next slide. This offering, this half-day Winter Institute, as I said, it's our third rendition of this. We hold a space like this in the winter and in the summer, is an offering brought to you by the School Crisis Recovery and Renewal Project. And I am deeply honored to be a part of this project as a field coach. We are committed to and every day working to create network, create spaces that really uplift the wisdom and needs of educators, of school leaders, of mental health professionals. And we do this through offerings like this. We do this through technical assistance. We can work one-on-one with schools. And that's been a wonderful way to hear what it is you're experiencing and needing and trying. And then we also create publications that uplift best practice and skills. And so thank you for being a part of our community or for checking in with our community for the very first time, whatever it is for you. We encourage you to check out our website and to connect with us on social media for further offerings and to just be in conversation with a larger community about this offering. Deep breath. We want to make space to share a bit, to arrive intentionally to this space. And so I'd love to invite you all to find the chat now and share who you are, the role that you play in supporting the mental health and wellness of others. And then today is largely about feelings. So we want to start, from jump. With some inquiry into what it is we might be feeling. So we have this beautiful tool, the beam wheel, that is shared in the chat if you want to explore this resource further on your own, if you want to see it up a little more closely. But the invitation right now is to find the chat and introduce who you are, where you maybe are joining us from, and the role you play in supporting the mental health or wellness of others, and the feelings that are most pronounced for you. Maybe in this morning, this week, we're on Thursday, the end of the week, or maybe even this year's semester so far. So I'd love to see that in. Erica, thank you so much for starting us off, and Carrie as well. Some beautiful sharing. I invite you to kind of peruse the chat once you have offered, but I'll uplift some of what I see. And we got folks joining us from North Dakota, from San Diego. I see Minneapolis and Oakland, Chico. Folks are joining with deep gratitude and optimism. It's really powerful to see and to hold. May that be contagious. May we all feel it in this space and time together. Got San Francisco, beautiful, born and raised. Thank you for being with us. More Bay, we got some exhaustion and joy, right? Holding both of those. Michigan. Lovely. So, you know, peruse the gallery, see the faces of who's here with us today. I think that's really a powerful way to feel connection and to increase our presence and personal kind of accountability to this collective space that we are all consciously and actively building. Today is largely about noticing what it is that you are feeling, what you are feeling somatically, what you are feeling emotionally, and how that might impact or influence the way you move through the world, the way you experience the world, the way you engage and interact with your work and with the folks that you touch on a daily basis. So thank you for your vulnerability and for sharing so soon in our gathering what it is you're feeling with and coming with. We can go on to the next. I'm gonna go over what today might feel like. Like I said, hopefully it's warm, it's soft, and it's vibrant, that we can hold all of those energies together. Today is really, as I said, about a call inward to reflect on and engage in some wondering. And before we can wonder, we have to notice, right? So it's a time to kind of notice and to normalize feelings, make space for large feelings or feelings that we might been socialized to label uncomfortable right away, but how can we soften into those feelings and see the beauty and gifts in them as well? It's a space about that we hope will create room for imagination and creativity as well, and then an opportunity to learn some strategies, some tools and ways, some technologies that might support us in sustaining our awareness, our attunement, our noticing together. So, go on to the next slide. I want to briefly go over our agenda just so you know what it is we may be experiencing together today. We're here in the framing and orienting to our time together. We have a phenomenal Dr. Amber McSeal who will be sharing some incredible wisdom and teaching with us in a keynote. And then two really beautiful workshops brought to us by scholars, artists, educators that I deeply respect, Michelle Lee, Noor Jones-Bey, and Emeka Ikwelum will be bringing us some opportunity to further notice, explore, and inquire into. And then we'll be ending workshops and going into some collective meaning making together and some further acknowledging of what it is we're hearing and where we might take this in our work, in our lives. So you can go on to the next slide. Want to offer some ways of engaging, especially when we're engaging in heart work and introspection. We want to uplift these trauma-informed principles that we have found generate the opportunity for safety, trustworthiness and transparency, trusting yourself and your own intuition and the energy of the space here, that we are a collective and we can lean into peer support, that we are creating, co-constructing this space in collaboration, in empowerment for you to share and feel your own experience, and then humility and responsiveness. There's also this other principle that Adrienne Marie Brown shares with us, that there is this unique constellation of energy and wisdom that has come to this space, right? There's 58 people in this room right now that have all really valuable walks of life and experience to share us with us, and that there is a conversation only this constellation can have, and our work is to be present and engaged enough to find that conversation. We can go on to the next slide. I want to invite folks to take a deep breath, maybe find your feet, maybe shake your shoulders a little. I just talked a lot. And I want to share just a few more things for another minute or two that might help us engage with the content of today. Today's theme is about attuning to the strong feelings we might be holding. And it is quite natural, normal, very prevalent for us to walk through our lives without much insight into the strong feelings that we hold. And that definitely can impact how we see the world, how we feel the world. And so today we want to create space for understanding activation. As our dear friend Shirley Johnson says, sacred, a sacred teacher, right? And so activation, we might think about synonymously with triggering, but I want to bring a little more spaciousness to the way we view activation. Activation can be a teacher. It can be a informant, information that can really guide incredible healing and lead us to joy and increased presence and wellness. And so it is a physical or emotional response to something that we might identify as a threat, and that might be happening consciously or subconsciously. And so I want to bring this definition into the day and allow you to think about your relationship with activation, your relationship with strong emotion and feeling. And where can we create a little more spaciousness around it? How might we begin to view it as a sacred or a significant teacher and guide to us? You can go on to the next slide. And so really what I have found, and I want to be incredibly honest, that this is difficult work, and I really can only self-attune when I feel my most connected to community and to source and to nature. And so self-attuning is not simply awareness. Self-attuning, we want to suggest is critical offering to our activation. And it is bearing witness to our own experience compassionately, our own experiences, even our stories with compassion, free from judgment or shame or labeling, or even expectation. And so self-attuning is really beginning to build an intimate relationship with your experience in the world. Whereas awareness might be a noticing, right? Oh, I feel that pain in my lower back. Self-attuning is moving in closer and asking, what is that pain here to teach me? What is it needing from me? What might I offer it to create some soothing? And sitting with it and acknowledging it on a deeper level and the many layers of it is really important to our work and our ability to show up for ourselves and others. And so can go on to the next slide. I have 2 more slides before we hand it over. I want to just share, and this is probably common knowledge to many of us, but there's incredible danger in ignoring our activation, in minimizing our activation, or quickly labeling it or mislabeling it without becoming that compassionate witness to it. And so we find that we might often operate from our stress response or a trauma response. And we know the grave danger in walking through life in fight, flight, fawn, or freeze mode, right? It limits our ability to be open to the incredible vastness of our experience in the world around us. It prevents us from really getting creative in our problem solving, and it provides tremendous physical distress and pain to us, right? It leads to burnout and illness. It also distorts our sense of self-efficacy. I've been an educator for about 19 years. I've worked in various capacities as a teacher and administrator and a school-based therapist. And I know that when I am feeling like disconnected from myself and my own experience, and when I don't create the spaces to really understand and sit with what is happening for me as I meet the needs of others daily, my sense of self-efficacy can become incredibly distorted and is a fast track to burnout. Right? When we think about what keeps educators in the field in through long periods of time, it's really feeling effective and at the work that we're doing. And so when we're constantly pushed up against or trying to heal through crisis, but we feel that we don't have the tools or that we don't have the self-regulation to be present for it, it can be dangerous. We can move on to the next slide. We believe as a project, and I'm seeing through so many of the offerings that we have engaged in over the last 3 years here with School Crisis and Recovery and Renewal Project, that self-attuning and attending to our activation really is critical to transformation. It's critical to renewal. And so we want to offer these kind of 3 ways to build our muscle around attending, around attuning, and around understanding our strong emotions so that we can meet them with compassion, with warmth, and spaciousness. And so one is to, and we hope that we'll begin to do this today, and we'll hear what it is that you already have ingrained in your life and your practice, but engage in practices that support deeply sensing and feeling your own experience in the world. That we find the strength and the practices and the resource to remain present to the rich complexities of our multi-layered and emotional experiences, and that we find ways to explore the physical sensations and feelings that might surface for us. Right? As I said, what might they be trying to tell us? What might they be here to teach us? And so I'm so excited to allow for a breath and introduce Dr. Amber McZeel, who will be supporting us in understanding that deeper, understanding that in the context of our work as mental health practitioners, and providing with us some strategy and technology to do that, to get real close and intimate with the feelings that surface for us. And so Dr. Amber McZeel is a writer, vocalist, sacred scholar, and activist. She utilizes sound therapy and guided somatic imagery to engage the knowledge of the body within an interactive and liberatory arts practice. In 2018, Amber launched her organization, Decolonizing the Psyche, where she weaves somatic praxis with Afro-Indigenous spiritual technologies and social justice, deep coloniality, and efforts to end oppression and create a more humane social relationship. So welcome, welcome, Dr. Amber McZeel. I'm incredibly grateful to be in this space with you, and I'd love to hand it over to you.
Well, thank you so much, Oriana. Thank you to the entire SCRR team, all the people in the background who made this happen, who have brought a vision into manifestation. I'm truly honored to be able to offer a bit of perspective, and appreciate each of you for taking the ride with me. So I want to start by just honoring the land that I am on, indigenous lands of the Ohlone people in Northern California. I want to honor my own ancestors. I come from Louisiana. My people go back there to the 1700s. I am the daughter of Madeline and Rodney, the granddaughter of Augustine and Mary, as well as Thelma and Matthew, and I stand on their shoulders. Just to briefly unpack a bit of what I'll offer, I am a community liberation, indigenous, and ecological depth psychologist. And I love the way that Oriana presented this, that today is largely about feelings, because that is a central theme of a depth approach. It's to make what is unseen more seen, to make the unconscious more conscious, to hopefully support that vision or intention of self-attuning and becoming more aware. And specifically what I want to offer today is a bit of a kaleidoscope into, I love the way that you worded it in the opening, Oriana. Why are educational spaces a site of psychic attack? That much like in trauma-informed approaches and practices, we begin with what happened to us, what happened to me. And so the same applies for an institutional space. What happened to the institutional space, and why is it a site of battle and conflict? So my framework centers on decoloniality and African indigenous archetypal psychologies and epistemologies, or ways of being and knowing. So a part of that begins with a simple phrase for me. It's a guiding phrase, that oppression distorts relationships. Oppressive logic, human hierarchies, class, caste systems, all of those things disrupt and distort the way that we relate to ourselves, to each other, and to the more than human world. And a decolonial approach, just to move away real briefly from the jargon of it, from the language of it, which is great. But at the end of the day, it's about wholeness making. I'm sure all of you are quite familiar as educators, as mental health practitioners. In these institutional spaces, we often run into the silo effect. This department doesn't talk to that department. The knee bone doesn't connect to the shin bone. All of this is ludicrous. And we find ourselves trying to move toward more holistic approaches, right? More holistic understandings. The good news is, or what I found in my journey, it's all by design. The silos are by design. And there is a way that understanding that at a deeper level can help mitigate some of the internalized stress and frustration and sorrow, deep grief or despair, at trying to maintain a sense of efficacy, being an effective educator. So yeah, that's a little bit of the overview of that. So I wanted to keep in connection with faces as much as possible, so I did not prepare a PowerPoint. So all of this is going to be in the spirit of those indigenous ancestors, all oral tradition and storytelling. So I'm going to tell a story. When I speak about, or when scholars speak about coloniality, decoloniality, things like that, we're talking about a time frame of about 400 to 600 years. And within that, a lot of things were invented. As it stands, this philosophical framework is established like this. If the last 400 years is a house, the house is premised on two axes. One was the invention of race. That's not only Black racialized people, it's white racialized people, it's the invisibilized indigenous people. It's basically creating the ladder or the human hierarchy. And the other axis is the invention of, or the formation of, extractive capitalism, for profit, for-profit, the urgency of for-profit businesses, institutions, et cetera, the bottom line. So that's the logos or the logic that has been driving our steam engine, if you will, of civilization for the last 400 or so years. And what makes that important for this gathering here and for what each of you provide to the world is that within that project, education is a massive pillar. How we know what we know, the epistemologies, whose knowledge is valid, whose knowledge is not, ways of knowing that are accepted, those that are not, those that get marginalized, the destruction of knowledge systems or ways of being and knowing. So it makes the project really hones in on the importance of education as a site of either maintaining or transforming, dismantling the perpetuation of that logic. So in the spirit of attuning and attending, I wanted to unpack briefly the naming, the norming, and the nurturing through an embodied practice. So what is the naming? Offering context, which I have a short time to do, but I hope it plants seeds of curiosity and spaciousness. Offering the context in a bit more, with a bit more depth of why educational settings are a site for attack on our psyche. Offering a context for this conflict. In the past couple of years, it's been the CRT, but there are so many more, right? Offering a context for the symptoms experienced by educators, what Oriana referred to as that activation, offering a context for those large emotions. And then naming the sensations. So this is cultivating a somatic awareness and sensibility. Why that's important in the context of decolonizing ourselves, which is creating more wholeness, is that just like people were relegated to the margins, African people, indigenous people, female gendered people, so are characteristics like emotions over rational mind. Another thing that was relegated to the margin was the body itself. From the Enlightenment era, they call him, his name is Descartes. I think, therefore I am, right? And that Cartesian dualism, that Cartesian binary preferenced, it prioritized the mind over the body. Thus, we still carry this way of being where the body is considered irrelevant, something meant to override, repress, something meant to relate to as a machine. It's mechanized, right? Something designed to push through and socialize to bulldoze through things and experiences. So a part of wholeness making is reclaiming the body as a site of knowledge, the body as the site of all experience, really. And unpacking norming. So one principle, one quality or characteristic I want to push forward here is undoing grind culture and finding and carving a new path forward. I want to note here how the pandemic ushered in a global sacred pause. And there were many voices coming out from many different fields, healthcare, public works, public service, of course, education, saying, we don't want to keep doing it the way that we've been doing it. In fact, the way that we've been doing it now that we have had a sacred global pause seems quite disharmonic, if not dysfunctional. And so I want to carry that sentiment forward into this space and really bring it alive, because there's a lot of truth to that. Many folks in the global human family found an opportunity to stop the old pattern of being and venture toward creating a new one. So my prayer here, my hope is that this space can be blessed with that too. And then norming also incorporates cultivating new practices. I mentioned one of them was cultivating that somatic sensibility, and the other is what I call cultivating critical consciousness, or C3. And I'll do that just by offering a bit more introspection into educational sites as and why they are a battleground. And then moving into nurturing, we'll have some time for engaging embodied practice toward the end of this offering today. How a deeper validation of the body, your activation, your joy, your charge, your grief, how does this support being a full human being, a capable educator, a balanced leader? And then there are some practical offerings that I shared with the SCRR team, specifically as it relates to the CRT battle, decolonizing classrooms, anti-racist or decolonial pursuits in the classroom. And I'll share with you a personal story about how that article, which is Anti-Racist Values for the Classroom is the title of it, how that article came to be. A note here that while the language might center on anti-racist within decolonial values for the classroom, it really is not limited to race, period. But I wanna really presence that, because race, anti-racism has become a buzzword, and unconsciously, there's a belief that it only implicates one group of people, when it's not true. It's the overarching theme of a dehumanizing project. And so at the end of the day, you could substitute anti-racist or decolonial for creating more humane social cultural relations. So decoloniality is all about wholeness making. So the final piece I wanted to add here, specifically as it relates to crises within the classroom, I was touched in preparing for this offering, having conversations with the SCRR team. I'm not an educator in a classroom, and so I have to defer to the wisdom of those who are on the front lines, to the lived experience of those on the front lines. But hearing about some of the kinds of crises that have emerged in the past few years, whether it's increased rates of suicide, the school shooting phenomenon, or phenomena, because there are many across the country, personal and subjective experiences of students who are dealing with trauma in the home that they inevitably bring into the classroom. And so I want to weave in here, first of all, just taking a sacred pause to acknowledge the gravity of these things and the gravity of the vicarious trauma, the impact on educators that actually produces. But I'm not but, and along with that, I wanted to offer an idea from Frantz Fanon, who is one of the first decolonial psychiatrists. His book, written in the 1950s, called Black Skin, White Masks, kind of chronicles the way that colonialism affects the psyche, or the project of dehumanization, period. And one of the concepts he pushed forward was sociogeny. And he stated, he was charged with treating people in an asylum in Algeria, which was under French colonial rule. And he actually resigned from that post because he could not comply with the mandate of his higher ups, right? Basically to just diagnose, push through, diagnose, medicate, et cetera. And his response to them was, I cannot diagnose these people outside of the context that they are living within. And I find within the mental health world, if not other institutions, we often try to diagnose or treat or whatever people outside of the context in a very siloed way. So the invitation here is how does one, or is one, an educator supported in putting child symptoms in a context? How can we tend and understand the myriad crises that occur within schools without taking into consideration the larger pressures and forces that influence these crises? And that critical consciousness might help build in the breadth and the spaciousness to recover and renew. So sociogeny, just briefly, sociogenesis is the development of a social phenomenon within a context. The phenomenon is sociogenetic, thus it indicates that it is socially produced, as opposed to being ontologically given, immutable, or static. So it's not something innate about the kids. It's a symptom that is emerging as a result of what they're living in and through. So taking a sacred pause again to honor those who devote their lives to nurturing the mind, hearts, and souls of our children. This is an honorable mission and a tremendous responsibility. So in this sacred pause, I also want to transmit a witnessing of these things to you, the educators, by acknowledging the shared experiences of what it yields. The tremendous grief. Oriana referred to this when she talked about the desire for educators to feel efficient, that they're having an impact, that they're affecting change, that what they're offering to the students is being received, and that it's fostering growth. And when that's not possible, it produces frustration. So I wanted to unpack some of that frustration, specifically in the context of grief. Grief has been part of our collective and shared experience over the past few years, and especially within educational sites. So grief has myriad expressions: rage, sorrow, disassociation, all kinds of things. And I want to offer 5 main reasons or grounds that grief emerges within. Grief can emerge over the death of a loved one. Of course, we well know that. Grief also emerges, one of these big emotions, over the loss of a dream or a vision, the loss of hope or an expectation. Grief can emerge through feeling the pain of others, what I call that vicarious trauma, a sense of collective grief or cultural trauma. Grief can emerge simply in response to the challenge of the moment that we're living through, the times we're living in. And finally, simply the act of being alive. Like there's an almost existential weightiness to being on the earth and having to wake up and carve your way each day. So in the spirit of just bringing the unconscious conscious, I wanted to offer those 5 pillars. And a question here: what if we regarded and tended our grief as holy and human? What if grief was the expression of love looking for a place to go? What would be the practices that we incorporate that move us away from bulldozing through life, overriding what we sense and feel, denying what we think or see? So instead, welcoming and tending our grief as holy and human. My hope is that this can support a normalization of acknowledging when teachers, when educators are activated, when your nervous systems are saturated, when you're needing to take a break and a breath, that this tiny gesture is an act of disrupting the grind culture. This tiny gesture is an act of recentering the body as a site of valid knowledge and knowing, that the body knows when it's enough. And to do that is to be decolonial. Simple, huh? So I know that we are pushing close to the close of our time here, and I want to give space. There, of course, is so much more to offer and share. But I wanted to offer just a few notes on why specifically sites of educational sites are a battlefield. So in the project of colonization, right, the project of marginalizing ways of being and knowing, destroying other knowledge systems, what they call epistemicide, we've consistently seen, and I'm sure educators know, there's been a consistent pushback from the time that the colonial project of dehumanization occurred and began. There's a concurrent stream or river where many, many liberatory-minded people, humane-oriented people have pushed back. And they've said, we want to bring in other ways of knowing and being. Where we have had narrowed and siloed expressions of history, the myth of American exceptionalism. Just to take one practical example, look at all the ways that folks have developed curricula to go alongside the Thanksgiving holiday. Just in 2020, I believe, they passed a law, what's it called? Designating November as Indigenous Peoples Month, right? Because they said, we need to stop just teaching this horrific myth of Thanksgiving that excludes a whole history of people, that doesn't tell the full truth, right? And at the spiritual and psychic level, that creates a ripple effect. It creates a ripple effect in a sense that those who want to maintain the myth of that delusional history are very, very much offended. They're very, very much offended by all of the change agents who bring in a more comprehensive and expansive history. And so the educational site receives that backlash, as well as all of the people within it, the educators. And so that wave, that pushback is what then generates the great pressure, the symptoms, the emotional experiences, the fatigue of trying to push back against a bureaucratic system, right? I want to land here before pivoting toward an embodied practice with you all. I want to land here with a personal share, a personal experience, which led to the article that I shared with the team called Anti-Racist Values for the Classroom. And it comes out of an experience I had going through graduate school, where I was studying somatic depth psychology, and it was a predominantly white institution, and I valued deeply the education I learned there. I valued deeply the education and insight into the intra-European colonial project, the repression of women and women's bodies within Europe. And I wanted to know more about my own lived and historical experience. So I would ask consistently, could we have discussions about race as a psychic and somatic phenomenon? The invention of race as a form of somatic violence and psychic pressure and trauma. Often I was met with silence, until one day I was met with what I call now a racist love letter. Someone anonymously left a little letter under my chair, and it pulled on the age-old insult of a Black woman's anger. And the note was about how, oh, Amber is so, I won't go into the details of it, but you can get the gist that I was so angry that it was dominating the space. I wasn't angry at all, but I found it peculiar and interesting, right? That was the response to my justified curiosity. And so from that came a series of focus groups and discussions, and two really talented professors gathered all that data, and they created a series of anti-racist or decolonial values for the classroom. Along with that, it's a beautiful, I see you clapping there. Thank you, Robin, for the cheers, because it's a lesson in the alchemy. And I wanted to share that in the spirit of really honoring the deep, big emotions that come up by sharing the way that I honored the emotion of anger, even though I wasn't angry. But anger is a powerful emotion that signals something that I love could be threatened with harm. And so what I did is a series of practices on paper with art, and I drew what they call in sociology, the volcano model. And the volcano model is something that I used or was shared with me in my early therapeutic days, where at the top of the volcano is the eruption, that's the anger, the secondary emotion. And in the body of the volcano are all of these other primary emotions which have led to the eruption. Some of them include feeling embarrassed or scared, feeling stressed, helpless, rejected, frustrated, attacked, unsure, disappointed, lonely, worried, offended, disgusted, feeling grieved, feeling overwhelmed, feeling tricked. And all of these could actually be the pressure and the impetus to the eruption at the top. The second layer of alchemical tending I did was to incorporate an African indigenous framework through the Orisha Agayu in the Lukumi tradition out of Cuba. In Orisha, you could understand as an archetypal pattern of consciousness, and Agayu is the volcano. The Agayu consciousness is represented or symbolizes a massive jumping over of obstacles. So I would actually sit with the letter and meditate on the consciousness of Agayu and use that as an embodied practice to sort of catapult me over the racial trauma and the racial stress that I was experiencing in the institution. And then finally, it led to the generative prayers and mantras and meditations that the anger was no longer a negative or emotion that should be despised or that one should be ashamed of, but it's instead the rupture, the capacity to compost. It's the energy of the phoenix rising. It's the energy of disrupting dysfunctional patterns or ways of being. It's the energy of transformation and illumination. And finally, it's the consciousness of clarity. So thank you for allowing me to share that. Oh, if you're talking, Oriana, yeah.
There we go. How many times a day do we forget the mute button? I'm so grateful for what it is you offer, the deep witnessing of our experience as educators and as folks just waking up in this world, right? And there's so much that I jotted down that I want to continue to percolate and be in conversation about. And I invite folks to find the chat and to just offer an appreciation to Amber for what it was she just offered. And we have about 8 minutes before our workshop, and this time is time to kind of allow what it is we hear in the keynote and what it is we are going to experience in workshops to kind of saturate and integrate into our being and our existing kind of organization of things. And so Amber is going to offer us a brief embodiment practice for a few minutes, and then we're gonna be in conversation around what it is we are hearing, what it is we are attuning to, the information that might be available to us based on the feelings that are generated right now. So I'm going to hand it back over to you, Amber, for a few minutes of embodiment, and then we'll do some processing as a community.
All right. So just taking a moment wherever each of you are to drop into a more embodied space by following your breath. That spirit or consciousness of me that animates your flesh gives you the experience of being alive. And gently moving your conscious awareness from the top of your head, allow it to expand through your head, through your neck, down past your shoulders, traveling past your heart, to land in the seat of your belly, your second brain. And as you settle into that embodied space, see if you can envision a golden shimmering ball floating in the center of your head. We call this the Ori, the spark of consciousness in every human being. The site of your unique gifts, talents, offerings, aspirations. And as you watch this gold ball floating, see if you can allow it to expand and fill up the entirety of your head, pushing out all other thoughts. Feel what it feels like to be filled up with yourself. As you attune to this feeling, noticing the sensations of your body, 37.2 trillion tiny red blood cells floating in the body, rivers of blood, the minerals of bone, the constant beating of heart like fire. And in your own internal voice, whisper to each cell, I accept my body as it is in this moment. The ruptures around me do not diminish or decrease my love and acceptance of my body. Notice any images, narratives, sensations that might arise. And as you prepare to continue this ritual of attunement, of deep compassion, take a moment to offer gratitude to all of the experience that have led you to this moment now. And at your own pace, gently begin bringing yourself back into the room fully by feeling your sit bones, feeling your feet. Reorienting by finding windows and doors. And when ready, you can open your eyes. Thank you very much, Oriana. Thank you to the SCRR team. And thank you to this beloved community.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Please, we invite you now to find the chat and continue to offer gratitude to your experience, to what you heard, to Dr. Amber McSeal. We have a few questions that we want to offer for some deeper noticing and intimacy. And they all start with A words you will acknowledge. But it's a space for you to journal if you would like for just a minute, or journal into the chat. But I'd love to hear some of the things that you just heard in this past hour that might be already reframes in your mind, right? What phrases, what words did you hear in the past hour that are still sitting with you? I'd love to see that in the chat. I deeply appreciate Amber acknowledging that in much of therapeutic work and trauma-informed practice, we ask the question, what happened to you? And needing to apply that to what happened to us and what happened to the institution or the space in which we are working within. Such an incredible question. And it supports, I find, us in not attaching so heavily to the reason why we might feel the things we feel. I know I take ownership for every feeling I have, and it is exhausting. But what if we can say, no, wait, what is mine to hold and continue to carry and to move through into my next days or my work? And what is not mine? What is mine to leave here and to reject and decompose? I love the word decompose that I heard. I'd love to elevate what I'm seeing in the chat. I'm feeling full, thinking about what it feels like to be filled up with myself. Beautiful. Brought a lot to think about. Themes of unity and acceptance. A gratitude for all of my experiences. Acknowledging on such a deep level that they're the reason why we're sitting here now and who we are. This is a guiding idea for me. I'm going to share, what if we regarded and tended to our grief as holy and human? What a powerful question, right? What if grief was the expression of love, looking for a place to go? What would be the practices we incorporated into our lives, right? How might we welcome our grief as holy and human? Love to invite space to also acknowledge what it is we're feeling physically, right? So I saw gratitude and joy, a resonance, we're feeling unity, but what physical sensations are we noticing in our body right now? I invite you to acknowledge that, to jot it down on paper for yourself or in the chat. And then this additional layer of attuning, right? So what is that feeling telling me? What information might be embedded in that feeling, right? Amber spoke to reclaiming the body as a site of knowledge. And how might we, she posed, how might we offer a deeper validation to the information that we can gather from our feeling, from our physical feeling, from our body and our emotions? Also, what are we wanting to hold on to, and how might we intend on sharing this information with our young folks, with our communities, our loved ones, our comrades, right? So questions to kind of think about, to help you take in and process so much we just heard and are feeling. We invite you to use the chat as a space to share that, but also your own journaling. And these questions we will bring back again and again. So maybe, this one, we're only sitting with what I'm hearing, and maybe the next round we can kind of move into what we're feeling. You pick and choose. They're just an offering to help us kind of make deeper sense and meaning of what it is we're experiencing today. And continue to use the chat to share that experience. We're gonna invite our first workshop presenter into the space, and she is, I'm gonna share just a bit about her before she holds incredible, vibrant, beautiful space for us. I met Mush maybe 17 years ago as a young educator. We both were. She worked with Youth Speaks then, and was just a phenomenal leader, educator, and poet that was able to help my young folks and so many young folks in San Francisco articulate what it was they were feeling, help them find words for it. And in that finding of words and in that naming, there was connection and affirming and normalizing of strong emotion that was so necessary for my young folks at 14, 15 years old, as they were feeling so much. And so I'm so grateful, Mush, to watching you hold space and the powerful ways that you help young folks sort through what it is they are feeling. Mush is a poet, a narrative strategist, a pioneer of spoken word and pedagogy, Harvard University Project Zero Fellow. Mush frequently is featured a speaker in many different spaces and realms. She's a powerful leader, now the executive director of Youth Speaks. And so what an amazing journey to have you really guiding that powerful force in so many people's lives. So I want to hand it over to you and get ready, y'all. Beautiful space.
Thank you so much for that beautiful introduction, Ori. And thank you to the SCRR team. Good morning and Happy New Year, everyone. It's really a joy to be here. Let me tell you something. Let me confess something very quickly, which is I am a go, go, go person. I am a runner. I'm the first in 30 generations to be born outside of Chosun, which is our family's ancestral home, in what was once a unified Korea, but now divided into two. So I inherit a lot of my almost chaotic, organized energy from my immigrant mother. And so this is a tremendous challenge for me, to be here, to be present, to not think about my ED life, to not think about my parent life, to not think about my teacher life, to not think about my organizing life. So I want to lay that before you to share that as I lead and host space, it's also, as we know as educators, it's always a challenge and an invitation for us to grow and remember to practice what we preach. Yes? Okay. So there are two concepts that I want to start with. We'll go into a workshop, but one is energetic reciprocity. This is a notion that Youth Speaks developed many years ago, but it's an ancient concept, and it's really hard to accomplish on a Zoom conversation. But it's a sense that, when you see, all of us have probably been to some type of experience, whether it's a talk, a poetry, open mic, a theater performance, symphony, opera, any type of live engagement. When you hear something, there's like the hairs on your arm kind of, they stand up, and then you feel almost like the whole room is suddenly elevated to another level of unity, energetic phase. Do you know what I mean? That moment where you feel the room lean in, whether it's physically or energetically or emotionally or spiritually. We call that energetic reciprocity. And it's the moment when somebody on stage shares and you feel it, it resonates, it's universal, you give it back. And then the person on stage understands, accepts, receives that, and gives it back, almost like a dialogue. And their energy is enriched. And our experience continues to be enriched. It's harder to do that over Zoom, but I do want to share that because I think that as educators, we probably all have some form of that exchange energetically that's happening in our classrooms when something happens and it feels really good, or something happens in a staff meeting or in a professional development thing, and it's like the room gets it, you get it, and a new level of understanding has just been unlocked. So I want to share that with you because I believe that one of the keys to getting to that place is this idea of life as primary text. And I'll write it in the chat, another concept that we practice at Youth Speaks, which is very connected to trauma-informed practice and culturally responsive practice. Everyone wants to talk about culturally responsive practice. In its simplest form, it is about the idea that we are the first and perhaps the most important story in any conversation about learning and teaching. Yes? We are the primary. If my story cannot be understood and read in any space, in any learning environment, then the secondary text feels conceptual, theoretical. Okay, so that's all the framework. I know this is not about frameworks, but I needed to share with you the way that I engage and have engaged in my practice for the last 20 years. So at this time, I want to invite you to please, if you don't have something already, something to bring something near you, writing utensil and or paper or pen. If you're like, no, Mush, I'm not analog, I'm digital, I'm 2023, and you prefer to have your phone, that's fine, like a note app, that's perfectly wonderful too. I will be inviting us to write very, very brief poetic entries. So in the chat, or maybe by show of maybe emoji might be more effective, who here identifies as a writer? Like not just I write, the act, the verb, but I am a writer, like a noun. Anyone? Okay. Oh, all two people. Just joking. There's more of us. I know it's a little scary. People, everyone's like, I'm not an artist. Let me just let you know, Mush, I'm not. Diana's like, I'm actually absolutely not a writer. Okay. I'm not an artist. I get it. I get it. All good. I want to invite everybody just for a moment to imagine that maybe it's okay to not have that identification, and that it's everything that we write is perfect. There's this concept of storytelling and poetry as being deep-seated and almost stuck and calcified in trauma. I believe that is a pretty crappy narrative. I believe that I was listening to a talk this morning on KPFA featuring an artist, Ashara Akundayo, who is the founder of Artists as First Responder. And she was talking about the importance of spaces for women of color to have, where grief is not shunned or shamed the way that, you know, when people are angry or there's rage or there's, where we feel upset, we're not shunned for it. But sometimes when we grieve and show vulnerability, the first thing we might say to ourselves or others who are witnessing our grief is, I'm so sorry, give me a moment, I'm so sorry. So there's an apology or an apologetic nature that not everyone, but sometimes it comes with us. And as I was listening to this, I thought, you know what? It's so funny to me because on the road to liberation, whatever that looks like for us, on the road of spiritual release and unlocking, on the road to being able to love and be loved fully with all of our crazy flaws and idiosyncrasies, all of that, that grief is actually a significant stopping point on any road to joy. Meaning it's not like grief is the end point and then we take out a new map and find out how to get to happiness and peace and harmony. But in order to get anywhere worthwhile, we have to move through grief. And so all of that is to say that I believe that there is that grief is an important friend on the journey to joy and happiness and peace and love. There are a couple grounding assumptions that I want to share very quickly. Stories matter, period. I'm not going to elaborate. We also arrive into this moment with a lot of complex histories and cultures, period. Also, the narratives that we tell ourselves today have the power to shape our future, no matter how silly people think words are, and no matter how much we try to justify as a storyteller, how neuroscience has actually proven that stories are really, really deeply powerful in reframing and reshaping actually the material experience of our life. We can just assume narratives are incredible. I want to invite us to read and just sit with this. I won't read this out loud, but this is a poem by the 24th Poet Laureate of the United States, Ada Limon. And I'm sure there are many of us, and so each of us will interpret this in lots of different and interesting and maybe some hilarious ways. But the idea that sometimes grief is almost worth living for, it makes me wonder, where does that take you? It took me to a lot of places when I first came upon this poem. So, but we don't need to share unless you'd like to. But so I'm curious about where your brain goes when you read something like this. I've been a poet and a storyteller since I was about 5 years old. I wasn't very good, but I tried. And if there's anything, I'm 40 now, if there's anything that I've learned, and I'm still relatively young, this is what all my mentors say. They try to shame me when I try to establish myself as a modern elder. If there's anything that I've ever learned, is that the most important part of a story is about the start of the most important stories I've heard and I've told start with really good questions. And believe it or not, there are better questions than not. So today's exploration is, I'm not going to have you write long, monolithic poems. I actually want to see if we can just write some questions. Is that okay? I will also say this, that maybe some of our brains are going to be automatically wired to say, how can I apply this to the group of educators that I serve? How can I apply this to the group of administrators and teacher leaders that I serve? How can I apply this to my next period? If it happens, wonderful. But I also want to offer something that Oriana invited me this morning with, which is an opportunity for you to show up without that educator hat, to show up as you and all of the different roles that you play in the spaces, because I think educators are some of the most underserved people on this planet. And so this is an offering just for you. Please, I hope you can receive. Okay. So here is a 10-word poem. This is the easiest barrier. This is the easiest entry, removing the barrier into writing or feeling like you can write a poem. The only rule is that it must be 10 words. I'm going to invite you to take out your writing utensil now and a piece of paper or whatever. If it's a Word document, that's wonderful too. And we're really going to spend about 2 or 3 minutes, and I'll let you know. I'll just check in gently. No hard, fast time to this. But it's a 10-word poem, and the 2 rules are that it must be only 10 words. It doesn't have to be stanzas. It does not need to rhyme. It doesn't have to be about anything in particular. We won't share it necessarily unless you feel compelled to or moved to in the chat afterwards. The second rule is that I would love to invite you to write a poem in response to the following question. So please take a moment. Some of us are like, oh, this is amazing. This is great. This is easy. I wrote this poem 80 times, mush. And some of us will be like, I don't know if I've ever been asked that. Some of us will be like, I'm also wondering that for myself. However, your heart and your brain, wherever it takes you, 10-word poem that answers the question, who are you when you are loved really well? And I would love to invite you to write your last 2 words. Thank you, Logan, for putting that in the chat. If you feel like you'd like to share with your colleagues and peers, please feel free to drop it in the chat. Thank you, Ronnie. Loved well, I'm happy, healthy, with my family, wealthy. Okay, rhyme scheme. Thank you, Robin. Thank you, Doc Martha. So just take a moment to see each other in the chat. Isn't it such a funny world we live in? See each other in the chat. I also ask the question all the time. I am love. I am overflowing. I am free. I am giving selflessly. A bird in flight, warmed from the inside out. Thank you, Matt. Open the door. Let the ghosts out. They need space. Ooh. Okay. Thank you, Scott. Thank you, Ori, for that offering. So again, keeping it super simple. This is not a competition. This is not a how much poetry can I write, but keep kind of honoring I love everyone sharing. Thank you so much. This is wonderful. I'm going to gently move us into the next exercise, which I promise is still another series of questions. So look, I promised that it was going to be a light lift, and here we are. So notice if you're reading things and if you're feeling warm in your chest, if it's bringing a smile to your face, if you suddenly feel a little bit lighter, embrace that. There's some joys that we can only experience in communion. You know, compassion, I'm sure lots of folks know this. Anybody know the root word of compassion, or the com, the Latin origin? Does anybody know? Can somebody share it with me? Doc Martha, it looks like you know, but I'm not sure. Direction. Compassion, the root, is in Latin is to suffer with. So compassion is actually the power of being able to suffer with and together. Okay, so the next activity, again, super easy. Another series of questions. This is all about you again. It's about who you are as a human being, as a person, as a lover, as a partner, as a friend, as a daughter, as a stepmother, as a foster parent, all of the things, as a poet, as an unrealized sculptor. All of that is fair. I'm going to invite us to write down 10 questions. And these are 10 questions that you can answer at some point in your life, some point today or not. Okay. Permission to move ahead? Okay, cool. No rules. The only thing is that each question should actually be a question, so not a response. So the first series of questions, please write down 2 questions that you recently discovered the answers to. So these are going to be pretty quick. 2 questions that you recently discovered the answer to, meaning maybe this is something that you've sat with your whole life since you were a child. Why did that person do X, Y, and Z? Why did they leave? Why did they stay? Why didn't they? But for whatever reason, either you let it go, or you discovered an answer that's sufficient for you where you are in your life. 2 questions that you've recently discovered the answers to. And please keep these are totally private. The next 2 questions are, what are 2 questions that you wish the world would stop asking? If 2 is too many, 1 is perfect. What is 1 question or 2 that you wish everybody else outside of your inner core, or maybe some folks in your inner core that you wish, just please pause on this question for 2023. What are 2 questions? This gets a little bit harder. Each question gets a little harder. What are 2 questions that you've been afraid to ask of your own healing? Is it time for therapy? Is it time for me to acknowledge my role in it? These are questions I've asked myself, y'all, so I'm not projecting. These are questions. What role did I play in that catastrophe? I avoided that question for so many years. So the next set of questions, and again, if you're just like, I'm good with 1 question, that's totally fine. Or you can even be thinking of it, a meditation. What's a question that no longer serves you in your vision for justice? Okay. Last question. And this one, I'm just going to invite everybody to read on their own. So I want to invite you at this time, feel free to put your pens down, just kind of reposition your body. And how did that feel? And I would love, we can stay on the chat or we can unmute for a moment before we move into the final exercise, but how do you feel? Was it boring and kind of uninspiring to answer a bunch of questions in what was supposed to be a storytelling workshop? Was it, getting too personal? Got to back away here. I'm going to skip that question, Mush. Was it a little tight? Was it? That's the one thing that poets, artists, writers, and educators have in common. Some of the best teachers I've ever had, some of the best lessons I've ever instructed were those where I had the right questions. Yeah, it's absolutely uncomfortable. And of course, like we share with all of our students and our colleagues, never go to a place that feels too deep to come back out of. And these are great questions to just keep in your back pocket. Okay, may I share something with you? Last exercise, and this is not me talking, you're very welcome. Okay. Which is actually not a photo gallery exercise because that's a separate one, but has anybody heard of Harvard Project Zero program? Project Zero, yeah. So some folks have. It's an integrated learning kind of lab that studies the way that studio artists and visual artists think and create during their moments of creation and work, and how that can be applied into our teaching and learning. One of the things that they do is they study the way that artists think. So this is a thinking protocol that a lot of artists use when they're analyzing kind of different scenarios in the world or different issues that they want to speak to. See, think, and wonder. Super easy. I've used this with middle school students. I've used this with adults, folks older than I have who've been in educating much longer. You can use this when you're watching a film, listening to music, and or reading experience photos or images. You don't have to write this down, but I am going to ask you to, I'm going to play a video, a poem from a friend of mine, but amazing, amazing poet from the South Side of Chicago, Maida de Valle. A couple years ago, President Obama invited a bunch of poets across the country in a White House, the first ever White House Poetry Jam. And so I want to play for you one of my favorite poems that Maida has done, and it happened to be at the White House. And using a see, feel, wonder protocol, just as you're listening, think about what you see, what you feel, and what you wonder.
Grandmother, our common thread began in my mama's womb. Spun my fetus like a record in her cipher, sampled your stubborn and mixed in her father's posture. Our connection is full circle. Abuela, you bear of children. You seer of spirits. You are truly miraculous. You are the whispers of litanies and white tablecloths. Your melody is captured in the spilled candle wax of my skin. My tongue's a broken needle scratching through the grooves of a lost wisdom, trying to find a faith that beats like yours. What secrets do your bones hold? What pattern does your dust settle into when I beat these drums inside my ribs? What color was the soil of your grandmother's garden? Grandma, how did you pray? Did you store the memory of your creator in strands of hair tucked into scented soap boxes or placentas buried under avocado trees? What reservoir did you pull your faith from? Was it anything like this gumbo, this sancocho, this remix of rituals and chant samples from muscle memory and spirits that visit my dreams that I struggle to stir into discipline to honor the unseen with these shells, this sage, these rudrashka and rosary beads, these white candles, crystals, statues, this sweet water, honey, rum, and sweet grass. Abuela, how did you pray before someone told you who your God should be? How did you hold the earth in your hands and thank her for its fecundity? Did the sea wash away your sadness? How did you humble yourself before your architect? Did you lower yourself to your knees or rock to the rhythm of ocean waves like I do? Grandma, how did you pray? Some say faith, is for the weak or small-minded, but I search for your faith everywhere. Need it to reassemble myself whole from these shards of Chicago ice and island breezes, so I can rewrite the songs of your silence and pain, your lonely fist, broken tooth smile, and burdens into a medley of mantras. Wish you could have shown me its shape, but I know it's in every sacred breath, in the shadow of trees that you visit me in the flicker of flames I stare into, searching for what's divine. And I know my body is the instrument my maker uses to rearrange the broken chords of your history into a new symphony for my unborn children's feet to dance to. And I see you, grandmother, gathering with your sister to chant the names of the living and the dead, and remind us all that we're gathered in marble temples around the midnight fire or block party speakers. We have always raised our hands to the sky, trying to touch the invisible force that holds these cells together into a fragile mass. Children of different nations, but the same vibration. We be sound to beat, to base, to bone, to flesh. We be sound to beat, to base, to bone, to flesh. We are all truly miraculous.
And that is Maida Del Valle. So I want to invite us to unmute and maybe just kind of ignore the chat feature for a second, which is very controversial, right, in Zoomlandia life. But again, I come from an oral tradition. My grandfather was a pastor, and I grew up in the church listening to him speak. And so I would love to feel and hear a little bit of sound. What did you feel? What did you see? What did you wonder? I want to invite us to all just take a breath at your comfort level. So folks who are joining us, we're really not talking about, we're just exploring and listening to each other's stories. Which, surprise, it's a profound way to draw connection. I always say that stories are, whether it's a poetry or poems or not, I'm a poet, but it is like it is the most untechnological analog time machine. And you go walk into a room, you don't know anyone, you hear one true story, and suddenly time and space, it's like you're brought so much closer to that person. That is, I don't know if science will ever be able to understand that phenomenon, and maybe shouldn't have to. So I want to invite you to do one last thing, which is we walked through a bunch of questions, right? So you should have, if you're doing at least 50% of the exercise, you should have 4 questions. That's good. I want to invite you to please take a look at the questions, or think, if you didn't write it and you thought about it, please choose one, your favorite. And I'll show some of the questions again. Please pick one, any one. Everybody have their one question? If not, this is a great question. If you're just joining us, if you can take a moment to just ask a question that is an answer to this question, which is, what is a question that you've been afraid to ask of your own healing? So write it as a question to yourself. Mush, when is enough enough? Whatever that question is for you. And I'm going to invite us into a very brief writing exercise. But before we do, I want to give us, there are a couple of hands that went up when I asked who here is a writer. We all remember doing like the book reports. We all remember being like, OMG, right? Like, how am I going to start? That is the scariest place in the world, the blank page. Oriana has heard me say this a million times to her students. So we're not going to do that, because this is about trauma-informed abrasive practices. I'm not going to throw you off the cliff. So what I want to do is I'm going to show a series of photos. What I want to invite you to do is on the side of your paper, on a separate scratch paper, please write for me what you see, what you think, or what you feel, and what you wonder. So we just did that thinking protocol with Maida's poem. Now we're going to move into a series of photos that really, to me, kind of speak to the moment that we're in. And so please write down one word, what you see, what you feel, what you wonder as these images come up. And I'll just kind of spend about 10 seconds for each image. What do you see? What do you feel? And or what do you wonder when you see these pictures? First picture. Does everybody have their words? See, feel, wonder? I'm not going to ask you to share them in the chat. How many words can actually, how many in the chat, how many words do you have about roughly? I want to get a sense of, because this is going to be the final exercise. 4, okay. Okay, perfect. 13, okay. Okay, yeah, that's about right. 16, Ori? Okay, A+. Okay, so this is what I'm going to invite you to do for the next 5 minutes, and you're welcome to close your screen. I'm not going to play music. When I am in writing workshops and other people play music that doesn't jive with my vibe, I'm like, you're messing up my whole writing moment. So I'm not going to do that. Feel free to close your screen, but I will welcome everybody back at the end of time. But this is what I want to invite you to do. Please use as many of the words that you wrote down in that series of see, feel, wonder, as we were looking at the poem, at the images. And please do your best to use those words in a response to the question that you circled as your favorite. So if the question was, Mush, when is enough enough? Please attempt to answer your own question using as many of the words from the See, Feel, Wonder protocol. Those are the only rules. It does not have to rhyme. It does not have to be, there does not need to be line breaks. It is a journal for you and only you. I'll see you in 5 minutes. And in the last 10 seconds, I want to just invite you to consider how much, if any, you're kind of moved to share with the group. This is a really important consent question to consider. So when a facilitator invites somebody in to share, it's like, oh man, maybe I should, but just check in with yourself first as an invitation. How much are you willing to share? Because you don't, like, 0 could be, 0 is good too, actually. With that, I do want to invite us to unmute and share as much as you'd like, or in the chat. But I also, I'm also like, that's the rebel educator in me. I'm like, you don't even have to read anything. You can also just share how you felt. That's totally acceptable, because we are, period. So I always love to ask my students and educator, teacher leaders, as well as young people, how did that feel before I ask, can you share what you wrote? How did that feel? That's usually more important than what you actually wrote. How did it feel to write that, man? So with that, I just want to invite anybody else who would like to share, just want to say anything, you don't have to share your piece. I don't want to close us off too quickly, but that we're nearing the end of the hour. Thank you, everybody. Thank you to the SCRR family. Thank you to Oriana. Thank you to Leora. Thank you to Nikki, who's our tech support today. Thank you to everybody that shared privately and also publicly. And so thank you. Thank you so much for doing this together.
Thank you, Mush. Thank you for creating the container. I'm deeply moved by how present and open folks are and have been through this process. And as I hear Diosa and Annie sharing Canada, myself, my own experience, we all individually, I think, played such a role in how this was able to land for us. And it really speaks volumes to the importance of awareness and attunement, and our settling and our softness allowed us to receive the information that we need, right, in our journeys. And so thank you. Thank you all so much. I encourage you to share further appreciation and really lean into that reciprocity in the chat. It's lovely to see and to capture and be able to continue to share with Mush later as well. And so please, if you feel moved to do so, find the chat and share some appreciation for the experience you just had, for what is surfacing for you. And we can pull up the slides for a bit of reflection. And before we try to answer one or two of these questions, I want to invite you to engage in a self-holding practice. There was a lot that we just went to, so many places. Mayra's poem swelled up so much like rage. I felt rage listening to that poem and what has been stolen from our people, and connecting it to Amber's sharing of education as being the, forcing a set of knowledge or taking away a set of knowledge. And just the connection there. It's just so much is percolating for me. And it may be for you as well. And the invitation is just to continue to lean into what we are feeling. But I want to invite a practice that feels incredibly regulating for me at times when I feel some like fractioning or when I need information to settle. And it's a self-holding practice. And so please engage in whatever way feels comfortable or accessible to you. You can keep your eyes open or close them. You can lower your gaze. And we first start by finding our feet and just noticing, feeling without judgment or need to make any changes, your feet's contact with sock, with shoe, with the ground, just a noticing. Maybe are they cold? Are your feet cold? Do they feel heavy? Just a noticing. And bring your noticing to your seated area. Are you making full contact? Is your back touching the back of your chair? Are you leaned forward? Find your hands and bring them to heart center. Invite you to create some warmth with your hands. Feel the sensation of your skin touching your skin. Listen in to the sound you're creating. Feel into the vibrancy. And with your next deep inhale, I invite you to hold either side of your temple, your head, with each hand. Gently, fully embrace with your palm, your head. And exhale. With your next inhale, I invite you to take your right palm to forehead and left palm, maybe move your hair if you have to the nape of your neck or your craniosacral area for a hold. Feel the warmth or the coolness, the energy you were able to create through movement. Allow your heart to settle. Exhale. With your next inhale, I invite you to take your right hand to your heart center and your left hand just below your chest bone to your sacrum area. You hold yourself firmly, like I got you. Feel in to your hold. Exhale. Two more holds. With your next inhale, I invite you to take your right hand just below your belly and your left hand back to the nape of your neck. Hold. Inhale deeply. Exhale. Find tenderness, softness in your posture, in your feet. Maybe firmness in your hold. Inhale. Take both hands, wrap your shoulders in a butterfly hug. And the final hold. Again, I got you. I'm here with you. I'm open to you. I see you. And exhale. Rest your hands on your lap. Notice your breath. You can open your eyes or raise your gaze. You find the window, the wall, something green. And in the chat, any one of these A's, I invite you to share with us. What are you acknowledging in this moment before we transition into another beautiful offering? What's feeling activated within you? What are your feelings telling you, needing from you? What do you want to hold on to past this moment? What might you share? So any one of those A's, choose a response, jot it down for yourself, share it in the chat. Thank you. Collective reciprocity echoed. I'm feeling like I'm starting to answer questions I've been asking for a long time. Somatic questions mostly. Wow, how powerful. Thank you for sharing that with us, Stephen. Feel free to share. Feel free to note on your own. We'll post these again at the end of Nora and Emeka's workshop. But thank you for dropping into that hold. And thank you for allowing yourself to lean into any of these questions. Cecilia, hey, I want to hold on to grief as a path to joy. Yes, I loved how Mush shared that, right? It's not a different map, right? You don't put the map for grief away and then find the map to happiness and joy, but it's all one. So grateful for what has been shared and offered, for the wisdom you all have contributed. sharing verbally and in the chat. I'm so here for this and so deeply needing this. We're really honored to bring to us our next two presenters, Noor Jones Bay and Emeka Ikwelum, who are going to be guiding us through further exploration using the heart as an incredible metaphor for that, leaning into. So Noor Jones Bay is a transdisciplinary educator, researcher, and artist from the Bay Area. She currently lives in Brooklyn, and where she's pursuing her PhD in urban education at the Steinhardt School. And she holds a fellowship from the Ford Foundation and the Urban Doctoral Research Initiative at New York University. Jones Bay, Noor is a program director of Excel in NYU, a critical literacy and college access program for youth in the South Bronx. She has been a phenomenal educator, committed to youth development in many different settings and locations, and also supports professional development in many settings as well. And Emeka Ikwelum is a transnational multidisciplinary research educator, artist, and curator from Boston. He's currently living in Chicago, Illinois, where he's pursuing a PhD in Black Studies at Northwestern University. Emeka's scholarly and creative interests converge at the intersection of history, critical theory, creative expression, comparative ethnography, and curatorial practice. Yes, okay. So his current research project examines the role of wonderment and contemporary and craft art collaborations between and amongst Black creatives. So again, we're in for an incredible treat. I want to hand the space over to Emeka and Noor, and they will guide us for the next hour.
Thank you so much for that, like, beautiful, just intro, but also for this whole day. I felt like my heart has been opening, and expanding in more ways than one. So I just want to thank everyone who's on the line already for sharing and being a part of this day with us. So we're going to get started. And I think one of the ways that I love to get started is really just to ground back into our heart space. One of it is Amber started us reminding us again how when we move through the world, oftentimes we're thought to think of our body as a machine. So I want us to slow down in this moment, and we've been doing it beautifully throughout the day, but just starting again to find our heart. And in this moment, as you're finding your heart, I want us to think of our heart actually with a musical reference. The heart as drum. So as we enter into this space, I'm just going to ask us to hold our heart, take a breath, and allow our heart to become a drum. And with this drum, I wanted to take us to a place, a memory of joy. What does this joy look like in your body? How does joy rise up in your spirit? What does joy sound like when it hits the back of your neck or your shoulder? Does joy jump out at you? Does joy start at your toes? Give yourself a space to imagine the color of joy, the sound of joy, alongside your heartbeat, your drum beat. As you immerse yourself into this place where joy is alive, pay attention to who's there, what's going on, what's flowing in the world around you, what's allowing this joy to get loud or quiet. As you immerse yourself there, choose one sound that represents that memory. Is it a clap? Is it a laugh? Is it a giggle? Big sound, small sound? We'll give ourselves some space now to immerse ourselves and look for that sound of joy. We'll take 3 more breaths. Allow the joy to come in your body, allow it to be here, however it shows. All right, thank you. Thank you. We're gonna open up and I'm gonna ask us to, if you can, take a second and write just a sound. What is the sound that came to mind for you? We started off with a heartbeat, which is also a drum beat. We're going to talk a lot in metaphor because we think it's a very important way for us to move in the work that we're doing with our feelings, with our heart. So in the chat, if you can, start with our first sound. My sound is ooh, ooh. I might write it with lots of O's. And my sound is ooh, ooh. And it's actually, there's like a rumble and a snap. Okay, that's also happening. And it's the gurgling energy of, 5, 10 women running around after they made their own chant. And every time we see each other, we scream that. And there's joy that just jumps through my spine as soon as I hear that sound. I want to invite everyone, if you can, to think about a joyful noise. If you want to think about it that way, what is one sound? It might be a drum. It might be the sound of a person in your life. Let me know. Hey, Stephen, the roar of an airplane engine. Canada says wind in trees, leaves fluttering, and the slow creak of limbs moving. Come on, y'all.
Hey.
Emeka, what's your sound?
Mine is a brrrr. That's my sound. So,
tell us about it. Where's the root of your sound?
It's just honestly when I want to release and remind myself to stop holding my body so tight. I just so.
Can I do a roll with it?
Right. I mean, you can do whatever.
Okay. Kelly says my grandson's giggle. Diana says the sound of my mother's voice. Brenda says the sound of the fridge door opening. Brenda, we know each other. Colin, the noise of my cat purring. Get it. Love it. So as we move into this space, and it's a beautiful segue to understand that grief and joy, they are on a continuum, they flow, they talk to each other. And it's so necessary for us as we engage with our hearts to trust that, to know that. One is not the only or the end of it. So we're going to get started just really thinking about, oh, we have some great other sounds in here. The sound is ah, but like when you take the large sip of cold liquids on a hot summer day. Beautiful, Christina. The pop when uncorking a bottle of wine. Who knows about teacher happy hour, okay? Or adult happy hour, there's a little joy there. So thank you. Please continue to put your sounds in the chat as we move through this space together. So we're gonna go into the next slide. And as we go into it, Emeka and I, actually, we come to this work really through a deep friendship that started in joy, but also with grief, right? And we were searching for these answers, and oftentimes we're able to talk through metaphor. And so we want to offer this dialogue as a space for us to really engage across metaphors that have been useful for us in feeling heavy grief, feeling intense joy, and recognizing how valuable it is for us to connect our humanity to nature so that we can be whole in our process of getting to know ourselves. So we're going to ground this workshop really in our experiences together in Mozambique, learning about local knowledges and the ways that they also conceptualize feeling the heart as connected to drum, connected to music, connected to emotion and feeling and culture and freedom. So we're going to start off with heart as refuge. So when we think about refuge, we think about refuge as a site of protection, a place of safety and belonging. So we also want to honor that a heart is a space that we can inhabit. And we can move forward as heart as a flowing river. So if we think about heart as not just a space that is stagnant or one space, but something that's moving, that we can actually engage with and start to actually shift the energy and the flow and what comes in and comes out.
And for those of us who work, you know, in the sciences or even in anatomy, thinking about the role of the chambers of the heart, where the atrium and the ventricles have particular roles. So the atrium is what receives blood, and the ventricles are what pump blood out. And so that's how we're going to be thinking about the flow of blood in our heart as well. What do we allow in, and what do we receive in, and then what do we allow that to then push out of us as well and emanate into the world beyond?
Right. And through this, we think about heart as a space where we can have intergenerational dialogue, heart as a place where we can sit and slow down and both adventure, but also sit and be in a place of accountability in regards to what's coming in and how can we address how we're showing up in classroom spaces, how we're moving through the world, what are the ways that our heart are shaping the ways in which we're in relationship to ourselves and others.
And one of the ways we want to also explore that too is to think about Nora and I are feelings people. We encourage people to feel. The goal of life for us is to understand feeling to the best of our abilities, but we also recognize that there's side effects to feeling as well. And so learning how to not be consumed by feeling so that we can also move with it and live alongside it as well. So we're going to talk about that as well, kind of avoiding the trappings of the heart as well in the midst of this presentation.
Dope. And Stephen, you're right with us. We're thinking about the chambers. We're going to collage the chambers of the heart. So you're with us. When we're thinking about the flow of blood, we're also using a metaphor for water as well. So thank you. Perfect. So we can move to the next.
So we have a set of objectives that we wanted to we're really excited to have this presentation with you all because Nora and I are both former classroom teachers, always educators, and are thinking a lot about our experiences in the classroom and what we needed at the time, particularly as early career teachers, to process our own grief and to process our own experiences as educators, but also as thinking and feeling people in the world. It can be, and I imagine that many of you can attest to this as well, it can be really challenging, at least I know it was for myself, to be a beacon of hope for my students who I'm in a position of influence over during times when I don't feel hopeless. And so having to perform hope and optimism in moments where I actually feel incredible despair and grief. And so really just especially thinking about, for example, when I was teaching when Michael Brown was murdered and dealing with the kind of intense grief around that experience, but also the compounding grief of like experiencing police violence and other forms of violence back to back. And so really just wanted to structure a presentation or workshop experience where we can sit with that, the challenges of being beacons of hope and optimism for students when we don't necessarily always embody that and feel that ourselves, you know? Yeah, one of the other things too is we're often sometimes socialized to normalize dysfunction, normalize trauma without effective strategies for processing the grief of those experiences. And so we wanted to also create a workshop experience where we could use art and think about our different toolkits. How can we tap into our networks, our creative practices to help us process through difficult feelings and to stop normalizing the dysfunction and the trauma that we're taught to just accept as what it is.
Right. And both of us spoke a lot about, and I think I'm also feeling this when I'm paying attention to the chat and folks who are sharing now, that we're moving through roles that oftentimes folks are asked to have a straight face or a serious face or to kind of brace ourselves in the face of intense trauma or a repeated kind of violence against ourselves or our students. And we recognize that that wasn't sustainable. That's not something that allows us a level of freedom, and even more, it doesn't give a pathway or a space for them to be able to also release, for us to do this as a community. We are all impacted. And so these practices directly come out of our experiences of having multiple students pass away or lose their life to violence, and recognizing that this is like a regular reoccurrence of needing to tend to the feelings, the emotions of what it means to do this work, honestly, given the context to which we're doing it. So we'll move to the next. Oh.
I was going to say too, Nora and I also both really subscribe to the idea of critical hope. So hope that's rooted in truth and honesty about our lived experiences or lived realities. But in that experience, when you are teaching students about the realities of the world around you, we also have to hold the fact that there's a heaviness to knowing and there's a heaviness to feeling that we also want to be able to move them through and move ourselves through as well. And so we want to kind of work around that with you all today too through this presentation. Okay, so normally when we're facilitating conversations that are really personal can be really emotional, can be really triggering in certain ways. We just think it's helpful to have a set of norms so that we can kind of hold the space in a way that everyone feels like they can show up and be them full selves, and show up and also just feel safe to share what they need to share and to learn in the ways that they need to learn. And so we just have a few norms here that, you know, we want to run through. The first is being fully present, recognizing that there's a lot happening in the world outside of us, and we have 50 million things that we need to attend to, but just trying your best to be with us in this moment. We have about 30-something plus minutes left in the workshop time together, so just really trying to focus the attention of being here in this moment with us, which I think we've been doing a great job with already this whole workshop.
Yeah. And then just to be curious and open-minded, we're going to jump into doing some art. Into Mush offered us so many beautiful questions and so many provocative images. And now it's really a time for us to shift into y'all giving us your perspective, to mine for images that are reflective of where your heart is now, the things that you need for your heart. And so a part of that is to just be curious and open-minded in the process of creating, which we already are doing so beautifully here today.
And along those lines too, just listening deeply and processing, really just trying to practice listening to understand, not necessarily to respond or to defend oneself, but to just really understand where your feelings are coming from. Why am I having this particular reaction? Maybe am I interpreting this in the way that I actually think that they might be intending, et cetera. And so just really practicing sitting with yourself in this presentation, and also sitting with the words of what people have to share.
And also a big piece that we always share is like just also being respectful. We love to share these norms also because I think they're such a necessary kind of grounding for any type of creative work that we do, recognizing that there's so many things that will come up. So in that process, allowing folks to be creative, to shift and do what they need to do, but also be mindful that we're in a community.
Mm-hmm. And just the last is speak from the I perspective, to try to avoid as much as you can generalizing and overgeneralizing, and speak from the truth of your experience, even if you do believe that that experience is universal, to really try to ground your thoughts and opinions and perspectives in your own experience. So these are just some norms. Feel free in the chat to drop down other norms that you think might be helpful for you to feel like you can show up and be your full self, and also to gain the most out of this experience with each other. So we can go on to the next slide too. Okay, so we're gonna actually just read a poem with you all and just process it a little bit as a collective. And so feel free in the chat as we read the poem to just think about what is coming up for you as you're hearing and just processing the words of this poem, but also what is flowing in and out of the heart of this conversation that's happening between the two perspectives in the poem as well. So we'll just get it started. Unbound in ways that felt familiar, distant, and unknown, a younger version of myself appealed to my conscience. They asked, ever curious,
how do I, black as night, remain light in spite of all this knowing?
Sincerely, I replied, I fear that I, lost in real time, have troubled your joy with troubling thoughts about a troubled world. Forgive me, for I wish that I knew what I did not yet know about the heaviness of knowing. We might never rediscover what was lost in transformation, but on your quest for life, liberation, and the pursuit of wholesomeness, be kind to yourself. Kindness will empower the heart to remember what love looks like in all forms. Okay, so let's take a second to sit with the poem. You can read the words again. You could take a screenshot of it. It's a poem I wrote some years ago. If you want to revisit it. But maybe if we can have some folks either in the chat or just unmute themselves to just respond to the question of what is flowing in and out of this conversation between these two people, or these two folks in dialogue with each other. What's flowing in, what's flowing out, what is flowing in and out of the heart of this conversation? Might help to think about what are the underlying questions or concerns. Grace, I see Grace. As that's something as flowing in or flowing out or both, potentially?
And there's no wrong answers. At this point, it's however, whatever comes to mind.
I see in the chat there's some uncertainty and maybe coming of age, so some anxiety about growing older and growing more aware of the world around, the heaviness of knowing. Sure. For Samiris says, what comes up for me is how do we show up vibrantly when we're shadowed by what we know? Growing up, sure. Part of what I hear when I reread this poem for myself too is like some regret on the part of the elder in the poem about just exposing them to more information. Grace, hope, lightness, the heaviness of our reality is awesome. Yeah, so thank you all for just sitting with that. And maybe one other question we might ask you all to just sit with and just reflecting on your own, or you can drop some in the chat as we move on as well, is like, in addition to kindness, what else empowers the heart to remember? So kindness is one thing that empowers the heart to remember. What are some other things that might empower the heart to remember what it needs to remember to function and to feel? Love, yes, I'm big into love. Thank you for writing in the chat. Joy, definitely. One of the things I was talking about with my therapist recently is also anger. Empowers the heart to remember certain things, and anger being a defense mechanism that my adult self has for my inner child. So it's not always a bad thing. Pain, hope, faith, grace. These are awesome. Honesty, I would add as well.
Hey.
Yeah. So thank you all for just sharing that. Okay, so we'll just keep this in mind as we move on to the next activity, which is going to be more of an art making, hands-on, interactive component. So Nora, we can go to the next slide, right? Nora, am I good to?
Yes. So we can go to the next slide. We're actually going to, we're going to move into, hey, Stephen, you were on us, collaging the chambers of the heart. So when we make our metaphors that are connected to nature, we're talking about the river, we're thinking about also the atrium and the ventricle. And so what I love about being educators and therapists is we're always finding different ways in which to engage in ways that feel relevant to the folks that we're working with. And then you also get to learn a lot. So the atrium is what's flowing in. The ventricle is what's flowing out. So we're going to build a collage activity, and we're going to give you a couple ways in which to do it. Definitely want you to flow in what ways feel best for you. But we're going to be asking really for you to be able to ground into basically a couple questions around where is your heart right now? And the question that we often check in around is like, do you need a refuge right now? Are you in a place where you feel just overwhelmed, tired, exhausted, and you need space to imagine and create space for whatever refuge looks like for you? There's also another question. Do you need a flowing river right now? What is flowing in and out of your heart right now? And how does it flow? So that's going to be one of the questions that we'll offer you. And we have instructions and other kind of supports to get you through this. So don't worry, you are held in this. And then you also are able to hold a space like what we just saw in the poem was an intergenerational dialogue, right? Which is oftentimes happening in our work when young people are asking us questions, and oftentimes they're looking for a critical truth. They're looking for critical hope. They want both us to be able to hold both. And so we want to create space for us to also collage our heart to recognize who we're carrying with us as we do this work. So in the chat, I'm going to offer first some directions on how to get started with our collage. And we're going to be doing this through, and I'm going to actually go ahead and just share my screen if possible. We're going to be doing this through Google Slides, and we're going to give you about a solid 20 minutes to just listen to some music, to groove, and build. A lot of the work that we do comes from working. I worked in a lot of women's and girls groups, and what we needed to do was sit and build things, right? And so I offer this will be in the chat, so you can always refer to it, but you're able to choose your own adventure. You'll get into the PowerPoint, you'll do some research, thinking first starting with yourself, what images are most needed given the status of your heart right now. So thinking of what came up over this whole session, what do you want to like visually represent to take with you, to represent where your heart is? And so we give a couple options: heart as refuge, refuge? Do you need a refuge? And I start with Chimoyo, it's actually Little Heart as a town that really helped us to learn a lot from local and indigenous communities around what the heart means. So this is a space where you can go ahead and share a little bit about what your refuge looks like, feels like, smells like, tastes like, who's in it, what do you do there? And you can use whatever images you like. Then we also have the other question is like heart as flowing river. Some of us talk about the exhaustion and the tiredness we're moving through. So we're going to ask you, is your heart flowing from the past, present, or future? Are you holding on to past grief or heaviness that's with you? Or there's something that you want to let go of? So the question is, what is polluting your river? And that's what's flowing in and what's flowing out of you. This is a radical accountability moment of maybe I'm holding a lot of anger and I need to find a way to move through it, transform it, alchemize it, like Amber shared, right? But I need to name it first. I need to name that it's here. So let's put a place for that. Then what is restoring your river? Because we understand all of these things are happening at the same time. So allowing you some space to write in what's flowing out, and using images to do that. And then if y'all are interested and you're sitting and you're like, oh, I actually had some interesting conversations with some young people and I'm struggling with how to kind of navigate some of these questions. We want to offer a space to collage, thinking about what is a question that a young person has asked that resonates or has challenged you to answer, which feels like almost my everyday in regards to my emotions and how to move through it. So giving yourself a space to sit with that and engage both from your younger self, recognizing that they're within us, and then also honoring the adult self who is here with us today. And then the last is, and we have some questions that you can peruse through if you need help, kind of like getting an idea around the collage. And then the last one is, y'all, choose your own adventure. So if you want to just jump in the PowerPoint and build whatever collage or whatever images come to you, please do that. But for us in our artwork, when we do joint art sessions, we oftentimes have a question or some themes to help us kind of massage out what we're feeling and experiencing at this time. So I'm going to pause there to see if there are any questions, and also include the PowerPoint where we can start doing our collage work. Are there any questions? Or go ahead, sorry, Mecca.
I was going to say, I dropped the link to the collage for you all to where you can put that that information. And just know 20 minutes is not a lot of time to answer some of these really big questions. And so just know that this is just the beginning of an ongoing conversation that you're hopefully having with yourself, and also then we'll encourage you to have with people in your life as well. So we have both the PowerPoint with the instructions that Nora's dropped in there, and then the link for the collage where you can add. So just choose a slide and maybe name it so that, you know, that's designated as your own. And then you can just add images on there. You can add words, you can add color, really make it your own, because toward the end of this workshop, we're going to just do a gallery walk where we'll go through as a PowerPoint presentation and just look at the different ways that people responded to the prompts. But to Nora's last question, does anyone have any clarifying questions or comments? Or hopefully that was clear.
And feel free, you can reach out to us, but we'll just go ahead and you can jump in the slide. What I'm showing here is there's a blank page, so you can just jump in there and make it yours. In the meantime, in the honor of our young people who also always teach us how to fill up pages, we're going to play some music, build some energy in the space, and allow both joy, grief, and whatever emotions come up coincide and live on our pages, in our images, and our words as they do. And we're gonna actually move into our gallery in a quick second. But how did it feel to put some of the words, some of the feelings, some of the thoughts into image? And
or were there any questions that really stood out to you or really profound to respond to as you were working?
Mm-hmm. Right, Kelly? I could do it all day too. Just turn up like the speakers, get loud, and sit with where I'm at, right?
Enjoy playlist, so like that's good feedback. It's like
cool. Right. What did it feel like to put it all together, right? Sometimes, you know, holding it feels so heavy. Yeah, we can definitely share the playlist. We have a collaborative playlist, because that's everything in my teaching practice for me is being able to have some sound, and when we talk about somatic practice, how much a part of it is slowing down so we can be in our bodies, talking about these things, writing them down can be heavy. And I need to shake. I need to hear something. I need to hear a sound. I need to hear a drum to remind me, to get me back into this moment. There was some resistance, but then a river, right? Come on, Santi. Come on.
Stephen, I see your point about the overwhelming nature of the questions, which we understand that for sure. We just wanted to make sure we gave folks options in terms of provocations and things they could respond to, but love it. River is where we're trying to be. We're trying to flow. That's our word, Norn.
You're right. So I'm going to put the playlist in the chat. And I don't know, Emeka, if you want to share or start giving ourselves some space to view the images. And then folks, while we view image, one of the things that we do with our young folks, but also grown folks, all of us, is, you know, you can just shout people out with your reactions as you see images, anything that feels provoking or exciting or colors. Feel free to throw that in the chat. We'll play some music and allow ourselves to groove. Another thing I want to share is that when we create space together, we are collaging that space, right? Like every bit of energy matters. Every part of who we are comes into this space and colors it in a beautiful way. So even if today you didn't feel the energy to collage, but you allowed your body to move or sway, you're a part of it. So thank you so much for all the participation and flow with us today. Ori says, I chose to explore what my heart as refuge felt like. I feel so much stronger in what I need after space to articulate it. So again, we love to give multiple options, largely because everyone has different things that their heart is desiring. And some things will speak to you and other times not so much, right? But to offer a way or an entry point, and multiple ones, is a huge part of our own artistic practice.
Okay, I think we're ready.
Brittany shares, this experience is liberating in ways I didn't expect. I feel you. That's when I started doing collage, I was like, what am I doing? Thank you so much for sharing this new resource to unlock ourselves when we were feeling stuck in the weeds. Thank you. It is an unlocking process. So much. Thank you. It's beautifully said, Brittany. I want to talk about, like, what is our first reactions to the folks who are in the space? What did it feel like?
I see a lot of affirmations in the chat. I agree. Very rich, very beautiful, very textured. It's cool.
And a part of this too is allowing ourselves space to show up in different ways, right? Oftentimes we talked about the hierarchy, we talked about the different ways in which we're taught to engage and share and name our experience. And so how often can we expand our practices and expand our own understandings of ourselves, as everyone is an artist, everyone is a creative. And the way that you view the world is generations deep. And the question is, do we create space for us to wonder, to feel, and to be in ways that we're not necessarily asked to be. So thank you for the vision, for the color, for the power. I felt there's this gorgeous interconnection between, I love it, gorgeous representations of how we are all multi-dimensional beings. Y'all did this gorgeously throughout this whole offering. So the space is really a reflection of y'all. So thank you so much for your words, your wisdom, and your images and your art.
And if I can say two more things, just thinking about our question from earlier about what else empowers the heart to remember, I think just this gallery walk and looking at everyone sharing our hearts with each other empowers me to remember too. Because when I saw the image of puppies on someone's, I was like, oh, I love puppies. Puppies actually make me feel warm. And so just like remembering the importance of sharing our stories and sharing our hearts with and being vulnerable, you know, sharing our hearts with each other as well. So thank you all for sharing with us too.
Thank you so much. I encourage you all to find the chat and continue to share your appreciation for this experience, for Nora and Emeka. I'm really sitting with an empowered sense right now, given the space to create what I want my heart to look like and feel like, what I want to allow in it, is an empowering experience, and quite a change from the feeling of things being done to me. So I really am grateful for that. Time. We see there's resources that you all use. I don't know if you want to say a quick word about the resources. We also have them in the deck as links for you all that download the PowerPoint. But
yeah, these are just texts that informed how we approach this particular presentation and some of the books that we are thinking through. And so we have others that we also use as well, but these are some of the primary texts that we were drawing from. And I know, just to speak to the Freedom Dreams one, it really is, what I love about this text is it's Robin D.G. Kelley talking about how we often know what we're fighting against, but sometimes we forget to think about what we're fighting for. And so the importance of visioning and envisioning and thinking through vision. So these are just some of the texts that we've been working through. No, I don't know if you want to say anything as well, but.
Definitely. And I'll also share more links, but the emergent strategy is a resource that I think everyone on this on this role, if y'all haven't already read it, but engage with it again, there's so much wisdom, to the point of, I feel like it's a reflection of a space like this, because she calls on so many teacher, educators, brilliant minds like yourselves who are here to share out their wisdom. And so one of the pieces around the heart flowing, she shares a lot around, like, are we asking ourselves, like, what time period are we in with our heart? Like, what are we bringing with us, right? And asking us to really have this radical accountability in regards to how we move in the world, but also have so much vulnerability and beauty. And then the last is just a short, really gorgeous article that I highly recommend, since we are also, I know folks have shared about families and really our intergenerational connection, but a mother really listening to the way that her son tends to his heart in his non-traditional way, and him being a teacher. So we center this recognizing that there's so many teachers in our worlds, and really it's about our ability to slow and recognize who's right in front of us. And sometimes it's through stillness, and sometimes it's through loud, raucous joy. And a lot of the research that I do also recognizes the way that joy is policed in a very particular way within Black bodies, but particularly marginalized folks' bodies, and how we're oftentimes needing to have that space of release, that space of being full. So these are some great texts, and we'll also share some other offerings as well as the questions, the instructions, if you want to take this activity to another place. And so it's a little bit of a teaser, but for you to just mine into your own experience and build some cool questions as we navigate in this work. So thank you all. We really appreciate your time and all the beauty, because my heart just kept opening up looking at the images. So.
Yes, and I love that idea of just an entryway, right? Just a beginning. But hopefully we've all had the felt sense of slowing down and of becoming more than aware, but really attuning to the feelings that we have been carrying for generations, possibly, right? We have been carrying for the last 3 years for sure. And giving this gentle, collaborative, constructive space to lean into them and not shun them away, but to really give to them what they might be asking for or longing for, our feelings, right? So thank you. I hope we all felt that, and that we can continue to imbibe it and grow it in the different spaces. Like, I think we could talk, for a few hours about the importance of activation and attunement. And really what we hoped was that we had the experience to really feel it, which is different. So we all contributed to our ability to feel and to different degrees. And we want to now engage in some reflection, right? How did this day feel for you? How did the listening, how did the big words, how did the concept, how did the opening, how did the invitation to lean in feel for you? What did it surface throughout the last 3.5 hours within your body, somatically, within your heart, within your cognition? Thank you. we have time to come off mute and to continue to hear a voice. That was lovely, Diane. Thank you for your vulnerability again and sharing. And Diosa and for folks that throughout our time together have let your voice into this space. Invitation is for us to find Mentimeter, which has been dropped in the chat, but we'd also love to hear verbally. What have you heard today that's really resonant? So in the chat, yeah, sorry. Mm-hmm.
Oh, sorry, I just wanted to quick, because I have to go run to the airport to catch a flight. But I just, this was very moving to me. I think one of the moments that I'm sitting with was Mush's presentation with the questions. Those provocations were very profound to me. And I actually was screenshotting them and sending them to people in my life. Like, ask yourself this. Mm-hmm. One of my friends is working on a vision board right now. So I just appreciate this space. I love deep conversations. I love deep feeling work. And I just appreciate how everyone showed up today in this work too. And it's an honor to have been involved in the process as well. So thank you all for the invitation. And Nora, thank you for always just being my friend. So I have to run, but thank you all for today. This was so lovely. Bye.
Thank you, Mecca. So we can pull the slide back up. I think we have a slide that might show what's populating on Mentimeter, but the invitation, yes, is to, in the chat, find Mentimeter and to bring open it up in the browser, and you will be prompted to kind of articulate what it is you've heard or hearing. Just want to echo some of the things or uplift some of the things that people are sharing in the Mentimeter, that there's this hearing people choose to lean into discomfort, love, patience, community, self-care, rebuilding. We're hearing folks take care of themselves for the first step of taking care of others. Yes. Right. And so often we hear that as providers, but are not given the structure, the space, the resources to actually take care of ourselves. So it can create further frustration, right? So definitely want to acknowledge that, that we have a role to play in it, and the institutions that we are working within also have such a responsibility to create shifts that support us in caring for ourselves. So next in the Mentimeter, and please feel free to also come off of mute and share, what are some of the things you're feeling in regards to emotion, but also physical sensation? What did that activate for you? Our keynote, our poetry, our writing. Full range of feelings I see here. All the feelings I've cried throughout the presentation today, and the tears were so needed to complete the buildup of the incomplete stress response. Absolutely, right? So often it's stifled at a feeling without the release. I'm feeling deeply and expansively grateful for this whole PD. Lovely. I feel in my body and not worried about what that means. Without story, without label. To do this work, I have adopted the practice of disassociation. Yeah. How many of us can relate, right? It's the ability to get through the day. Next prompt, an invitation to share, what are your feelings telling you? What might you, right? If I heard Amber say this, I heard Mush and Nora say this, what if we give the information of the body, right, more power than the stories in our mind? And so what are our feelings telling us we might need? What if we value the feelings enough to deeply listen, the feeling of grief and how it's showing up? What is our feeling telling us? That pause is necessary, is vital to recovery and renewal. Move your body whatever way you see fit. Yeah. I've seen videos of, to speak to the stress cycle and completing it. I've seen videos of, I think hyenas in the wild, and after they've feared a hunt and survived it, they will freeze. And then once they've established some safety, they will shake. They will shake everything out. They will move to release. Right. And a lot of our cultures value dance and movement and limpia and ways to physically release what it is we're holding, that the grind culture we exist within right now doesn't always create space for or value. Right, we have 2 more prompts. So the next is, what are you wanting to hold on to? What feelings, what words, what ideas, what practices are you looking forward to? Are you smiling when thinking about holding on to? Yes, dance whilst you make dinner. Me too. I want to hold on to the teachings about activation and attunement, right? Reframing the way we think about activation, creating softness and spaciousness and wonderment, to really witness compassionately our activation in the process of attuning to it. I want to hold on to the space of acknowledgement of my body and what I hold. Beautiful. Beautiful. Anyone wants to unmute and share what you wrote or share what you're thinking or feeling about holding on to, or anything? The invitation is very much here and would be very much appreciated. Every contribution has enriched our learning today. The last prompt is, I intend on sharing. Like, what are some ways that you're maybe thinking about and you don't have to think about? Your mind did not have to go there. We've said that a few times, right? How you're going to share this with others. But if you do have ideas around how you might share the feeling that you experienced today, or a strategy, tool, or idea with others, what might that be? The simplicity of a question, right? Just one question or 5. Time to visualize our needs and how powerful it is to be in community when doing that. Yes, thank you. There's resources in the chat too. We'll compile these and share them out for sure. Please, please, please do share this space with your community. In just about 30 seconds, we'll go into some other opportunities for learning and being in community. And so please spread the word and continue to come back. We have a survey that we would really, really love you to fill out. It's a bit risky creating space to feel in the middle of a day. And we would love to hear how this resonated with you in the survey, and what might support you in engaging in spaces like this, as well as what other spaces you might need. So all of our offerings are free. They're completely free. And the way that we're able to continue these offerings is through your survey, or through your evaluations. So we really would love you to fill the evaluation out. It's very quick. It's about 5 to 7 minutes. As we said, we have the many of the resources that our faculty use to build their offerings today compiled in the deck as hyperlinks. And so we want to definitely make those accessible to you all. We invite you to explore them and to share them with your communities. For CEUs, we offer 2 hours for this, and so you can click on the link here or email us for more information. But that was an offering in exchange for your participation today. We have a few projects that we're really excited about upcoming. So one is an ongoing project, school-based suicide postvention from a liberated lens. So a few of the sessions have already begun, but there are still many more that you can join. I believe they're monthly, and you can click on the link to register for those. I'll be facilitating quarterly. Okay, sorry, quarterly. But there's maybe 1 or 2 more left that we'd love you to join. I am going to be holding space with 2 other colleagues in Love Made Visible, a space for BIPOC folks to explore wellness through text, through our own lived experience, and really lean into all the feelings together collectively, and to imagine new feelings and spaces to sustain those feelings. So that's coming up in February. That will be a monthly offering with many in-between sessions as well. And then trauma-informed school systems for crisis recovery and renewal, February 23rd. We hope you can make it to that and that you share that offering. There's more, self-attuning to emotional activation. Oh, okay, so we're gonna have a community of practice coming up. I'm really excited about that. There'll be 4 sessions with clinicians that will offer strategies that have really been foundational in their practice. And then they'll be guiding us through those practices to support us in further attuning and attending to activation in our work. It's gonna be really cool, some great conversation and opportunity for exploration there. We also have an offering with Dr. Megan Corrado, stories, trauma narratives with urban youth for therapists and clinicians. So there'll be 2 sessions often there. And then a moment to pause is the return of a beautiful community of practice offered by Antoine Moore, with opportunity and strategy to slow down and really hone in on trauma-informed communication. Wow, I've never ended on time. It's 12:30 here in Oakland, and what a beautiful, full, rich, vibrant day it has been with you all. I really hope that you continue to join us for offerings and that you share your experience and your needs, even your skills with us through email communication, through the survey, and then connect with us on the socials as well. Have the most beautiful day. I'm going to stay on just a little if you want to talk. But I loved today and I loved your energy and I'm so grateful for you. Thank you.